Welcome back to the deep dive. Okay, so everyone knows the Noah story, right? Ark, flood, animals, rainbow. It's like the ultimate redemption story in the Bible.
It is. The standard take is cleansing, a fresh start.
But what if that's not the whole story, or even the main point? What if the flood wasn't about saving humanity, but replacing it?
That's exactly what we're digging into today. We're moving past the familiar narrative and looking at some, let's say, more esoteric sources, things like the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Book of Enoch, ancient Midrash.
These sources suggest the purpose was inverted, that God decided to end the Adamic line he created. That's
Wow.
huge. Why? I thought the problem was the Nephilim, the Watcher's kids.
Well, according to these texts, the corruption ran deeper, much deeper. It wasn't just the hybrids, it was humanity itself. Genesis 6.12 says, all flesh had corrupted their way. The whole Adamic project, maybe it was seen as a failure.
Okay. And the key to this radical idea starts with Noah himself. We see him as this righteous guy, perfect in his generation.
Right, but what does perfect mean here? These other texts, particularly the Lamech scroll from the Dead Sea Scrolls, paint a picture of a Noah's birth that's, well, terrifying.
Terrifying how?
His father, Lamech, sees the newborn and is immediately convinced his wife, Batanosh, didn't conceive with him, but with an angel. A watcher, perhaps.
What did the baby look like? It must have been more than just, unusual features.
Oh, absolutely. The scroll describes his body as white as snow and red as the blooming of a rose. His hair, white as wool. Striking, yes, but maybe explainable.
Like albinism, maybe?
Perhaps. But then there are the eyes. The text says his eyes lighted up the whole house like the sun.
Hang on. Lighted up the house, like emitting light, not just reflecting it.
Exactly, like spotlights. That's not human genetics. That's something else entirely. Lamech concludes, and this is almost a direct quote, he resembles the sons of the God of heaven and is not sprung from me but from the angels.
Wow. Okay, so fundamentally other. Engineered, you might say.
That's the word. Lamech is so disturbed he goes to his father Methuselah, who then consults Enoch, and Enoch confirms it.
What does Enoch say? Was it like the Watcher unions or something different?
Different. Enoch explains that the guardians of the sky have inseminated Batanosh without touching her sexually.
So not a fallen angel liaison, but deliberate angelic engineering. A divine intervention to create something new.
Precisely. Designed to establish a new order. A post-human lineage, perhaps.
This completely reframes Genesis 6.9, perfect in his generations. It's not about Noah being genetically pure human, is it?
It suggests he was perfectly engineered as this new type, perfect in his angelic or divine makeup. He's the template for the replacement race.
Okay, so if Noah isn't quite human, or maybe more than human, then the flood. It's not a rescue mission.
It becomes an elimination event. God's judgment not just on the Nephilim, but on the entire corrupted Adamic line. The goal is replacement, using Noah as the seed for this new beginning.
And Noah's own attributes sort of back this up, don't they? His 950-year lifespan. That's way beyond normal.
It is. And think about the sheer logistics of the ark. Building it, managing it for over a year with all those animals. It suggests capabilities beyond a normal human farmer. Superhuman endurance, maybe.
So the flood wipes the slate clean, replaces the old model with Noah's line. Is there evidence in the text that this new humanity was different?
There's a really interesting kind of chilling detail in Genesis 9, right after the flood. God tells Noah's descendants, "The fear and dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth."
Huh. That is different. Adam named the animals, right? There was harmony.
Exactly. Adam had dominion, but it seems cooperative. This new command implies dominion through, well, terror. An inherent quality in the post-flood humans that makes animals instinctively fear them. It suggests something alien about them, something that triggers primal fear.
A post-human race ruling by divine fear. Okay, the world is remade. But not everyone died in the flood, did they? According to these other sources anyway. The story gets even stranger here.
It really does. Let's talk about the mothers of the Nephilim, the women who mated with the Watchers. They didn't just drown.
What happened to them?
The Book of Enoch gives a pretty stark answer. Chapter 19 says, "And the women also of the angels who went astray shall become sirens."
Sirens. Wow. Not the Little Mermaid version, I'm guessing.
Definitely not. Think Homer's Odyssey. Creatures of death and seduction, luring sailors to their doom, surrounded by piles of rotting corpses, sometimes depicted as half-bird, half-woman predators.
That's a specific kind of curse.
It's perfectly tailored, isn't it? They were seduced by supernatural beings breaking a boundary. Now they are condemned to be eternal seducers themselves, bound to the very waters that killed their offspring, and crucially, they survived.
So they carried things through the flood.
Forbidden knowledge, magic, divination, the secrets the Watchers taught them, they become these repositories of dangerous pre-flood power lingering in the waters and coastal areas.
Which might explain why you find mermaid and siren legends all over the world, right? Like the Mary Morgan in Brittany or the Rusalki in Slavic lore. Maybe these are folk memories encounters.
It sets up this really complex post-flood supernatural landscape. You've got the Watchers bound in Tartarus, the spirits of their dead Nephilim kids roaming as demons on land, and now these cursed women, the sirens, haunting the waters. Evil wasn't wiped out, just rearranged.
Okay, Siren survived, but there was another, even more unlikely survivor, wasn't there? A giant.
Yes. Og, king of Bashan, a literal Nephilim, or at least of giant stock, who somehow made it through.
How? He obviously wasn't on the ark.
Midrashic tradition tells this incredible story. Og was too big for the ark, so he supposedly clung to the outside of it.
Clung to the outside for the whole fleet.
Apparently. The story goes he swore eternal loyalty to Noah, basically becoming his servant in exchange for food passed out through a hole in the ark.
That's an image. A giant clinging to the side of this boat.
And there's this detail. The floodwaters are described as boiling hot, destroying everything. But the Midrash says the rain falling directly on Og was miraculously cool, a specific divine allowance for him to survive.
And we know he was huge. Deuteronomy mentions his bed 9 cubits long. That's, what, 13.5 feet?
Easily, making him somewhere between, say, 8.5 to maybe 13 feet tall, a living relic from before the flood.
And he wasn't exactly reformed by the experience, was he?
Not at all. He's identified later as the fugitive who tells Abraham that Lot was captured. But the rabbis say his motive wasn't good. He hoped Abraham would rush off, get killed in battle, and then Og could take Sarah.
Predatory, just waiting for his chance over centuries.
Exactly. And his end only comes much later, against Moses. Moses himself was apparently intimidated by Og, not just his size, but his incredible age, possibly hundreds of years old by then.
And final battle was legendary, right?
Yeah.
Moses needed help.
Oh, yeah. The story says Moses had a 10-cubit weapon, but could only reach Og's ankle. Og tries to rip up a mountain to throw at the Israelites. It takes divine intervention. God sends a swarm of ants, or a worm in some versions, to tunnel through the mountain so it falls around Og's neck, trapping him. Only then can Moses finish him off.
So Og is finally dealt with. But his survival and the sirens, it raises a huge question for the cleansing idea. If the flood was meant to wipe out the Nephilim and their influence, how did we still get giants after the flood? Goliath, the Anakim, all those guys Israel fought.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? If the flood was a reset, why did the giant problem persist for centuries?
Did something, or someone, sneak through on the ark itself?
Yeah, this is where some interpretations look very closely at Noah's family, specifically at Ham's wife. Some traditions identify her as Naamah, a descendant of Cain's line.
Cain's line. Already associated with forbidden knowledge and maybe pre-flood corruption.
Potentially, and remember, the Watchers primarily targeted the daughters of men, so the theory goes Ham's wife might have carried, let's call it dormant Nephilim genetics onto the ark.
Whoa, so the contamination wasn't fully purged.
If this theory holds, then no. And it offers a really interesting explanation for why Noah curses Canaan, Ham's son, not Ham himself.
Right, that's always seemed a bit strange.
The suggestion is that Noah cursed Canaan because the boy was already showing signs, maybe unusual size, strength, or temperament, revealing those Nephilim traits inherited through his mother.
And if you trace Canaan's descendants.
Exactly. The Jebusites, Amorites, Anakim, they are the peoples who inhabit the land of Canaan, the very land known for its giants. And Ham's other sons, like Cush, who fathered Nimrod, or Mizraim, linked to the Philistines and Goliath. The connection to gigantism or unusual mightiness seems clustered in Ham's line.
So the post-flood world wasn't purely the new angelic line of Noah. It was immediately a hybrid. Noah's line, maybe residual human elements, and this revived Nephilim strain through Ham.
It paints a picture of a much more complex genetic and spiritual landscape right after the flood. Not a clean slate, but a continuation of the conflict.
Plus there's the whole and also afterward thing in Genesis 6.4.
Right. That verse says giants were on the earth in those days and also afterward. This strongly suggests the Watcher problem wasn't solved by the flood either.
How so? Weren't they in prison?
Eventually. But maybe not immediately when the rain started. Some interpretations suggest the binding in Tartarus happened after the waters receded, which means,
Some could still have been free during or right after the flood, long enough to interact with the new population.
exactly, long enough for a second incursion, mating with post-flood women and creating a whole new wave of giants, the Rephaim, the Anakim, the very groups Israel later encounters.
So the flood wasn't the end of the giant war. It was just phase one.
Pretty much. Israel's conquest of Canaan then becomes a continuation of this ancient pre-flood conflict against these corrupted bloodlines. David versus Goliath is just one famous chapter in a very long story.
Okay, so putting all this together, this alternative reading suggests the world wasn't really cleansed. It was just transformed.
Transformed, absolutely, into a persistent system where these forces, angelic, human, demonic, Nephilim, are still interacting, still in conflict. The dynamics didn't disappear, they just shifted.
You've got Og connecting the pre-flood world right up to Moses. You've got sirens potentially still out there in the deep waters. You've got Israel fighting giant clans for centuries. It's a continuous thread.
The ancient war never truly ended, it just changed shape.
It definitely makes you rethink the narrative. If the flood didn't eliminate these ancient forces, but maybe just contained or rearranged them, if the world we inherited is this kind of hybrid reality, well, what does that suggest about the unseen influences still potentially shaping things today?
That's the lingering question, isn't it? Something to think about.
Indeed. Lot to mull over until our next deep dive.